In an attempt to make Greenvale feel like a location that's both authentic and grounded, as well as to add depth to the cast's role within the game world, Deadly Premonition's developers included a few businesses that the players can enter and patronize. Let's look at those businesses, their owners, and what role they serve in the story. First off is the Engi Diner, which is owned and operated by the husband and wife team of Nick and Olivia Cormack. Obviously a reference to the Double R Diner from Twin Peaks, it serves a parallel role in Deadly Premonition's story, where the pleasant atmosphere and surprisingly good food cover up an undercurrent of marital tension that slowly burns in the background of every scene involving the characters. While Olivia is content to live as a small-town business owner, Nick is driven by the idea that he's meant for greater things. Not only does he study art and pursue painting as a hobby that takes up a decent amount of free time, he considers his cooking to be equally worthy of praise. While by all accounts the food is spectacular, his attitude alienates most of the people he encounters. Well, actually maybe it's just Agent York. The diner's name has two origins. Within the world, it's a reference to Nick's famous apple-based gravy, while on a meta level, it's named after Axis Games, the company responsible for the game's production. The cavernous Muses Gallery seems out of place in the relatively small and notably blue-collar town of Greenvale, largely because it exists only as a vanity project by Diane Ames, eldest daughter of one of the richest families in town. While it's technically open to the public, it has almost no visitors and serves largely as a repository for Diane's personal art collection. That collection is made up entirely of representations of forests, which Diane seems to be fixated on. It's definitely an odd subject matter given that Greenvale is already surrounded by lush forests, but there's actually a reasonable explanation to be found if players go out of their way to speak to Diane during the game. While drinking at the Galaxy of Terror, a tipsy Diane will reveal to York that her childhood wish was to live in the forest among the trees. However, she couldn't square that with her love of tight dresses and high heels, so her compromise was to create a fake forest indoors, so she could be surrounded by the woods on her own terms. It's also notable that the gallery is named after the concept of a muse, as if Diane is concerned less with the art itself than she is in the feelings and the ideas that inspire it. Sweary 65 is a roadhouse-style bar situated at the edge of town, where patrons drop by for unpretentious seats and tall glasses of beer. It's run by Richard Dunn and his son Quint, who've gone all in on the cowboy vibe the place gives off. The only real surprise is that it doesn't feature a mechanical bull in the corner, although there are electronic dart machines to keep the public entertained. There's even rewards for players good enough at the game to set high scores. York can win a weapon bag that can increase the number of weapons he can hold at a time, as well as trading cards of Richard and Quint to add to his collection. In the game's most obviously meta nod outside of the special menu, the bar is named after the game's creator, Sweary. But within the game, Richard reveals that the name came from an old friend he met at a Seattle bar back in 1965. They apparently really hit it off, and last he heard, his gloomy-to-the-bone friend is now making video games or something. That's right, Sweary is canonically a character in the world of Deadly Premonition. The dark and cozy Galaxy of Terror is the property of the McLean family, originally run by their mother, and after her death, was taken over by Carol and her older brother Thomas, although Carol handles the day-to-day operations. Over the course of the game, we learn that Carol is trapped by the responsibility of managing at the bar, although it gives her a way to express her passion for singing. Carol has a nightly show where she sings for the bar's patrons, allowing her a brief escape from her life as a small-town bar owner. The in-game explanation for the bar's odd name is that Thomas named the bar after one of his favorite movies, Galaxy of Terror, a 1981 Roger Corman-produced sci-fi horror film that was part of the glut of movies made to capitalize on the success of Alien. It just so happens to also be the name of the production company run by Kenji Goda, the game's co-writer, which produced Goda's 2005 film Life. You can even spot a poster for the film in Carol's dressing room. The local general store Milk Barn is owned and operated by the Ingram family, specifically Lily and her husband Keith. The store carries all the staples that the people of town need, from cereal to fresh fruit and packaged meats. In a subtle message about the town's worsening economic state, it seems as if the Milk Barn is just barely holding on financially, with Lily and Keith running the whole place without any help since Becky sequestered herself at home after Anna's death. And honestly, Keith isn't much help either. At one point, York can even help out by doing the work a stock person should be handling, and move crates of food around the back room. The poor economic state of the town could also explain why Mash Brothers Market actually hangs anti-Milk Barn flyers outside their many locations in town. Milk not needed? You could try opening one of your shops instead of trashing the Milk Barn, Mash Brothers. Unlike some of the previous locations we've covered, there isn't an in-game explanation for the store's name, but the Milk Barn is the name of a now-shuttered corner store in Snoqualmie, Washington, that the game's developer saw during their research trip to the Pacific Northwest. Perhaps the strangest store in the game is Panda Bear, a gun shop that's owned by Wesley the Gunsmith. It's a tiny location that only operates during nighttime hours, with York seemingly being the only customer who shops there during the game, which makes one wonder exactly how the place stays in business, especially since Greenvale's residents tend not to go out much at night. Wesley's trading card suggests that he's a talented gunsmith that people come from great distances to avail themselves of his services, so it's possible that the bulk of his business is done via mail and courier, with customers from other cities and states. Sadly, we're never given any justification for the local gun store having such an adorable name, other than, perhaps, to reinforce what an odd duck Wesley himself is. A Barrow Graveyard is Greenvale's only cemetery, and it's maintained by a peculiar person who goes by the name Brian the Insomniac. York visits the cemetery after being dispatched by Harry Stewart to find the origins of the red seeds within Greenvale. On the grounds, he finds several red trees fenced off towards the back of the property. There's not a lot to do here other than talk with Brian, who offers cryptic clues to the real dangers of the red seeds and insight into the spiritual side of Greenvale. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to determine the significance of the name, if there is any. The Greenvale Forest Park is an expansive stretch of countryside owned by Harry Stewart, who employs Jim Green to maintain its trails and structures for use by the public. Jim is often accompanied on his rounds by his grandsons, Isaac and Isaiah Ingram. It's on one of these morning walks that the three are unfortunate enough to discover Anna's body. The park is one of Greenvale's main tourist attractions, offering great fishing by Velvet Falls, lush forests, and a large observation deck to view several places around town. The now-abandoned Moyer's Lumber Mill was originally founded by Harry's father, the original Raincoat Killer, Mr. Woodman. It provided employment to much of the town for decades, and since it was shut down by environmental protests, the town's economy has all but collapsed. The name Moyer's Lumber Mill likely belongs to the person or company that bought the lumber mill after Harry Woodman left town and changed his identity. This is also where Anna was murdered by George before the events of the game. It's hard to imagine a town better suited for a massive health crisis than Greenvale. The entire town could come down with food poisoning and there would be ample beds to take care of them all. Its enormous size is due to the fact that it was built to service thousands of citizens that lived in Greenville at the height of the lumber industry's power in town. While the name Greenvale General Hospital is fairly utilitarian, each of the hospital's wings has been named after a chess piece, presumably by Dr. Usha Johnson, who's absolutely obsessed with the game. York can purchase medical supplies from Fiona, the hospital's receptionist, and receive an IV of a strong sedative from Usha. Players were also originally supposed to be able to play chess with Usha during the investigation, but this minigame was sadly cut during Deadly Premonition's development. In addition to its clock tower, whose bell can be heard throughout town, the Greenvale Community Center serves as a town hall for public meetings and other functions. At one time it functioned as a theater, although it's been many years since its last production. During the investigation, it's where York meets the townfolk and warns them of the possibility of a serial killer among them. The center's original name, Mercury Theater, is a reference to Orson Welles' theater company from the 1930s. Their radio production of War of the Worlds is reputed to have caused mass panic, which is something George & Co. thought York's mere mention of the Raincoat Killer legend during his speech would cause in Greenvale. The Greenvale Sheriff Department is a daily visit for Agent York, as he often joins a team there for homemade lunches provided by Thomas McLean. There isn't anything special about the name, but given the similarity of the architecture of the building, it can be seen as another nod to the Sheriff Department in the Twin Peaks television program. Lysander's junkyard is exactly what the name describes, though the General himself sees it more as a collection of discarded treasures than scrap. The junkyard also functions as Greenvale's car repair shop, where Agent York can upgrade the Sheriff Department vehicles using various parts hidden within the yard, buy a number of restored cars, and even have his beloved personal vehicle restored after the events of the game's opening scene. The Great Deer Yard Hotel is the huge hotel where York stays during the investigation. Like the enormous Greenvale General Hospital, is a remnant from Greenvale's more prosperous days before the town's economic collapse. It's run solely by the sweet but hard-of-hearing Polly Oxford. Besides York, the only other guest who stays there during the game is the traveling Red Tree salesman, Forrest Kaysen. It makes one wonder why Polly goes to the trouble of making so much food every day just for 2 guests. I mean, look at the spread she has out here in the dining room. The hotel also houses a small museum to Greenvale's main industries. On the lobby's second floor, there's a wide array of logging artifacts and newspaper articles on deer hunting. There's also other photos and articles lining the hallways that discuss the history of the lumber industry in Greenvale on the first floor. The game offers no explanation for the hotel's name, but like the Engi, it's an obvious nod to a similarly named hotel from the Twin Peaks television program, The Great Northern. Lastly, there's the Heaven and Hell gas stand run by Jack the Raging Bull and his wife, Rosy Lips Gina. York could fill up on gas, get a car wash, ew, that is not a car wash at all, and even bribe Jack for some useful information during the investigation. The name seems to be a description of the couple themselves, or at least their ideas about customer service. Jack, a seedy-looking man who has a general disdain for his paying customers, represents hell, while Gina is his beautiful and heavenly counterpart, who enjoys lavishing attention on male patrons. Those are all the operational businesses that made it into Deadly Premonition. There were a few more possibilities that didn't make the cut, such as an unnamed movie theater that was removed from the game completely, as well as places like the Book Mountain Bank and the numerous farms scattered around town, which all have red color appearances on the map, meaning York should have been able to enter them at some point, but that's a story for another time. For now, thanks for watching, and be sure to join us for more Deadly Premonition videos as we celebrate the best video game ever made.